Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. This week is week number 5 of the Holiday Hand Lettering Project series, and if you missed the other ones, be sure to click on the link in the video description. You can have access to all those videos. So this is exactly what we're going to be creating together this week, and all the materials that I'm about to walk you through, those are all in that link in the video description as well. So anything you might need as we walk through this tutorial, just click on that link and you'll have access to everything. It's not required that you use these exact materials, but I want to walk you through some of my favorites and get you familiar with some supplies that maybe you haven't used before so you can really see how versatile they can really be. So for this one we are using black paper. The black paper I'm using is Astra Brights cardstock, so you can see it's a little thicker than paper, and this color is called Eclipse Black. I've got a paper towel because we are using Finetec metallic watercolors. These are super handy. They're a little on the pricier side, but they last a really long time. I've had this for over a year and I haven't gone through it yet. I've actually expanded my collection of these. They come in a bunch of different sizes too, so these are kind of some of the ones that I've collected over time because I really love using these. I just love the way that they look on black and experimenting with all these different colors. But I would recommend this one if you're just starting out. It's a really handy multicolor pack that you can really do a lot with. So we're going to be using this one for this tutorial, and Finetecs tend to dry out really quickly compared to regular watercolors, so I recommend using a Pentel water brush with this. I'm using the fine tip for this video, and the nice thing about this is you just squeeze on the water chamber and you can constantly have water flow into these watercolors, so even though they dry out fast, you can keep them wet much easier than you can with a traditional paintbrush. So for all the extra little details right here, I am using Moonlight Jelly Roll gel pens. These gel pens work super well on black. You can see how vibrant they are. I'm using the finer size of these, so these are Moonlight 06s for blue, green, yellow, and red. And then for this line that comes around, I'm using a metallic black Jelly Roll gel pen, which shows up really nice for me. And then for the details on the lettering, hopefully you can see the white right here, the little highlights, we're just using a regular white Jelly Roll gel pen. So I'm going to set this aside and we're just going to jump right in and get started. So we're going to start off by creating our lettering, and then we'll put the circle around it so everything will stay really centered, and then we'll go in with our final details. So I'm going to open this up. And once again, you just want to make sure that your colors stay really wet as you work, otherwise they'll get gunky and they won't transfer as well. So in order to create this kind of ombre effect, I'm going to start out with a base layer of this gold orange, and then we're going to add in the red afterwards. I find this to be probably the most efficient way to create these blends for me. And I'm going to make this one green this time just to see what that looks like instead of blue. So I'm going to start off by using this kind of golden orange color. So I'm just going to give it a good squeeze. I've got some nice water down here, and you're going to need to mix it up for a little bit so that color really gets onto your bristles. Okay, so I'm all ready to go. So now I'm just going to letter out my writing, and then we will get into our blends afterwards. Okay, so the other cool thing about this drying really fast is that when you've got it on paper, it dries really fast there as well. So for traditional watercolors, when you go to blend, you want to make sure things kind of stay wet for your wet on wet technique. But for this one, you can't really do the wet on wet technique because it doesn't stay wet long enough. So blending works actually best, I've found, with these when your lettering is already dry. So that's really helpful for us here. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is that if your lettering isn't totally centered on your paper, it's absolutely okay. I actually like starting with a larger sheet of paper to take the pressure off of centering everything from the get-go. So from here I can create the rest of my artwork and then I'll cut it down at the very end. So don't feel like you have to start over if everything's not perfectly centered right now. So I just want to make sure you feel comfortable about that first. Okay, so we're going to get into blending. So what I have is my red right here. So I'm going to get this nice and wet and get that paint on my bristles. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have red at the top and red at the bottom of this phrase. So now I've got some red on my tip. So what I want to do is blend from the top to about halfway, and then from halfway on bright to the very bottom. So what I'm going to do is just come on here, and you can see it's starting to blend really well. And especially when you have two colors that are similar enough, the blend happens much more naturally. So I'd recommend doing that. But definitely feel free to experiment. The blends on these can be really cool the more you practice. So I'm just going to come through here, and I'm just coming about halfway down so it looks like a nice even blend, and then I'm going to do the bottom part, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now we have our lettering all set, and if you want to come back in and darken up any areas, feel free to do that as well. Just build up that color and make it blend nice and smoothly. Okay, so now we're going to move into adding our highlights to our lettering. So the first thing we need to decide is where our light source is coming from. So for this example, I'm having my light source come from the top right. So all the top right areas of each of my letters are going to get a little bit of white. So I'm just going to come through here and add that right to the edge. So I'm touching the actual edge of the letters. So I want to make sure I've got some good gel flowing through my gel pen. Okay, so this should be dry because it dries so fast. And if you touch it softly, I'm not getting any paint. So I'm all set to go because you just want to make sure you're not going to smear anything. So then I'm going to come in here and just touch the right edge of all of my letters. And then I'll be right back. Okay, we've got our white highlights all drawn in there, so that's looking really good. So the next thing we need to do is start our strings of lights right here. So we need to make multiple circles around our lettering, and then we're going to add our little lights, and then we're going to be all set. So what I recommend for your circles, so circles can be pretty hard to get right the first time. So what I like to do is just come around, just make this motion with your hand. They actually taught this in art school. So whenever you're drawing circles, you want to make the motion with your hand. It starts creating a little bit of muscle memory for how you're going to draw it. So the more you kind of go around your letters, just making this motion, when you finally put your pen down to the paper, it'll be more consistent with your circles. So what I'm going to do is come around probably 4 times right here, and it's okay if your lines cross. We kind of want that because they're strings of lights and they're kind of messy anyway. So make that circular motion, and once you feel comfortable with where these circles are ending up in relation to centering your lettering at the same time, then you can uncap your gel pen. I like drawing a little bit on paper first just to make sure that my ink is flowing, then I'm all ready to go. So I've got my circle motion, and then I'm going to touch the paper. Okay, so my ink washed out in a few areas right here, so I'm going to try to correct it. And it's okay if it bleeds off the top edge too. That's totally fine. I just want to make sure I get these lines in here. Okay, so once we have our lights, it's going to cover up some of the messier spots, so it's okay. Like, this isn't completely ideal, but I'm glad that you're seeing this so you can see how to kind of correct it if you have any areas where if you go too fast, sometimes the gel doesn't flow as smoothly, which is okay. All right, we are all set to go right here. So the next thing we're going to do is start dropping in our lights. So what I like to do is grab one color at a time, put it all the way around, and then go to my next color. So I think I'm going to start out with my red, and all I'm going to do, these do not have to be perfect. I'm not an illustrator by any means, but I can doodle pretty well, so this works out. So what you're going to do is just find a strand of light, and you're just going to kind of draw this oval shape that mimics a light, and color it in, and then you're just going to put little lines around it to make it seem like it's turned on and it's glowing. So I'm just going to come over here, do the same thing, and this is okay if it's messy too. It's part of the illustrative style. And I like alternating the sides that the lights appear on the string, so it seems more natural. So they kind of flip-flop as you go all the way around, and you're just sporadically putting them in different places and then put your little glow lines on. So I'm gonna go all the way around with this one, and then I'll switch to the next color. Okay, so I got all of my red lights on here, and you can add more later on as you see how everything kind of fills out. I like putting fewer than maybe I need just to start with. That way everything doesn't get really dense and then more complicated where your eyes don't really know where to go. So I would say, like, don't put them super tight together because we're adding, you know, 3 other colors. And then once you have all of your colors, then you can add a few more just to fill in the gaps if you need to later on. So these colors I chose because they're kind of the standard colors for Christmas lights. But again, you can use whatever colors you want. So I'm going to jump into the yellow, do the same thing, and then go to my green and my blue. And once I've got the rest of the colors in, I'll be right back. Okay, so the very last thing that I like to do is I just put a little dot on the end of each little light bulb so it looks like it's connected to this string that we've got going around. So I'll just go through and put a little dot just on each one of these so it looks like, you know, the final detail. Okay, so that concludes week 5 of our holiday hand lettering series. If you decide to try this out and post it on Instagram, please tag me. My handle is @EveryTuesday, and use the hashtag HolidayHandLettering, PROJ, for project. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design or lettering tutorial every single Tuesday, and don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design and lettering freebies. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week.